Hello again, and welcome to the Marc Oslar Retirement Experience. My name is Randy Cook. I'm here each week with Mark as we kind of go through some of the questions that you might have. You know, you see financial headlines out there, and you wonder what it's going to do to your retirement if that market goes down, or if taxes go up, or they change the rules about 401ks. Yeah, those are legitimate concerns, and that is really why we're here, and also to introduce you to Mark, who helps people plan for retirement every day. Mark, how are you doing today?
I'm fantastic, Randy. I know we're here in December now and getting into winter months. North Carolina is one of those strange states where in December it could be really cold one day, and then all of a sudden it could get warm the next day, you know?
It's what I like, living in the South, because, I mean, I grew up in Minnesota, and it snows starting in December, and it doesn't leave until May. In the South, it can snow, but usually it's gone a day or two later. So, you're okay. So it's not so
Absolutely.
bad. Well, what we want to do here on this show is give you a real good look at what's going on as far as your retirement planning is concerned and the things that you're concerned about. And you know what? Over the last couple of days, last couple of weeks, there's been some markets that have gone down. We've seen a lot of red lately, a lot of volatility, as they say. And I've also seen the headlines change a little bit. People talking about a market pullback, a market crash, and things like that. And we've been going up for so long. I saw a quote from Bill Gates, and he said, "Save like a pessimist and invest like an optimist." So when it comes to building retirement, tell me what you're optimistic about, what you kind of be pessimistic about, how you approach that, and how we should kind of feel about retirement.
It's funny that he brought this up. And, obviously you do want to invest like an optimist because you want to believe that your investment's going to really pay off. Because if you're investing, you're expecting a return, right? And then being a pessimist about saving, well, yeah, that's just saying, if things get bad, I just need to save. So I don't need to be spending all my money. And it's a really good mindset. So let's just take those two phrases, optimist, pessimist. Let's talk about retirement planning. Let's discuss, in retirement planning, what you're looking at and how you're going to adjust and switch based on your age. So let's say you're 35 years old and you come to me and you're talking to me about investing. Well, you probably have more than likely all your money in the market, maybe some bank money, maybe a few conservative things, right? You're going to be very much an optimist. Now, you could become a pessimist when you get to 65 in the sense of investments, because when you get to 65 years old, you might feel like, you know what? I don't think I want to deal with another market crash now that I'm retired, because I'm really, really focused on passive income at this point. So for me, when I look at this, I say, you know what? There's a constant juggling act about your age. And when you get to retirement, how are you going to invest? And are you comfortable at that level? So a lot of the times, first places we start, Randy, is we'll do an assessment. We try to understand where a person's at and where they want to go from this point. When do they want to retire, or are they already retired? And what's the trajectory of the relationship in the future? So the objective is to understand risk tolerance, things like that. So we'll run a report. That report will identify many, many things for us. So again, optimist, pessimist, that can flip-flop.
Yeah, I think the information there, what I get from you there is, once you get all the data about your retirement and what you've saved, what's going out, what's coming in, maybe the information can make you an optimist and you think a little better about your retirement. Or maybe it's the fact that there's so many things out there that are unknown, and that makes you a pessimist. I totally understand that. We don't know where markets are going. We don't know where taxes are going. We don't know where healthcare is going. So that can make you a little bit of a pessimist. But having the data and knowing where you stand and knowing what's, your income is going to be in retirement and it's going to handle your needs, that is a comfortable place to be. So let's get that information to you and see what your retirement date is. Maybe it's sooner than what you thought. Give Mark a call. Give him a look on the website. Let's start there. More2retire.com. Go to the website, more2retire.com. Just spell it right out. And you'll see Mark's website. We invite you to tool around, learn more about Mark. Find out about the steps to more, as we like to say, or give Mark a call. It's 984-300-1984. We'll do a no-cost, no-obligation look at your retirement, what you've done, and what that looks like for your retirement. You know, maybe you're saying to yourself, I'm about done with work. I wonder if I can retire. Let's give you that information. Maybe it's a green light, and let's go. It's 984-300-1984. I see this question a lot in the Ask the Advisor column, so I thought I'd throw it your way. People ask, can I live in retirement on just my investments alone? The proceeds of my investments. I invest my $1 million and it's going to kick off 4%, $40,000 a year. Can I live on that? And so that kind of brings up a lot of different questions. Do you run into people that say things like that? I don't want to touch my principal. I want to live on my investments alone. Is that a good idea? Mark, what do you say?
I hear that quite often. You know, there are some people that say, you know what, I don't really care what I leave. I want to spend as much as I possibly can. I said, well, you know, if you want to spend as much as you possibly can, then obviously we still need to set up a plan. But if you're looking to just draw your returns and you really want your principal to just always be there, well, then we have to have a real conversation about a plan we can use to make sure that something like that could actually happen, because that's not always the easiest thing to do, especially just depending on how much income you need in retirement. So it's funny we bring up this conversation because let's just say, for example, you're retired military. Well, you're probably very proud to say that you have this military pension in addition to maybe other income you're drawing, or in your retirement, you've got this military pension, you got Social Security. So you feel like you're pretty comfortable with the amount of income you have. Well, why is it that there are folks that are so negative about annuities? Because that military pension is an annuity. Okay. Now it's an immediate annuity, but there are things out there, there are types of annuities out there that can provide income in the future for you where you don't necessarily have to have an immediate annuity. You can use a deferred annuity and put an income rider on it. These particular income riders are designed to give people lifetime income. And so I bring this up because, you know what, if you're going to build this, there's so many different ways you can do it, Randy. I mean, oh my gosh, we could do a juggling act where, you know, you got some money in the market. We've built in some income provisions there. You know, we've built in some REITs. We've done some structured notes possibly. But then on the other end, you do an annuity over here. Now, is it possible you could draw down from one place more than the other while pulling the other money back up? Yes, that's why I said you can look at this so many different ways. But in terms of putting together a plan, it's really important. And you have got to be willing to adjust and change. You know, if you're not willing to adjust and change and switch things around, then I'm telling you're going to get stuck in the mud. So we stand by our principle in this office, PIG, preservation, income, and growth. We talk about it all the time, right? So what do we want to preserve for the rest of your life? Well, you told me your principle. Okay, well, let's have a real conversation about that. Okay, income. Where's the income coming from? Do we have what we figure to be a lifetime income or not? And how do we build something like that for you? Because income is extremely important, and taxes and inflation have a big effect on your income, so we have to prepare for that too. And then the last one is growth. What are we going to do about our growth, growing it sensibly? And again, if you're looking for 8 to 10% returns, something like that, you have to know that that's going to involve risk, right, Randy? I mean, something like that's going to involve risk.
Yeah, I think that if you wanted to live off your investments and you had $5 million to start, that wouldn't be a terrible conversation. That would probably be okay. If you have $500,000 and you said, I want to live off my income from my investments, that's kind of a different conversation, because now we're talking about putting you at so much risk, then that might be something you're not really comfortable with. But the idea to fill up that bucket every month, every 2 weeks you get paid from your employer and your bucket is filled up. You live your life. You talked about the military pension. Those guys, those gals, they have a bucket that's filled up every month. You can have that as well. There are financial vehicles to do that. And if that's what you're looking for, to say, I want to put my money here and I want to live off what that does, there is a place for you. Give Mark a call. Let's talk through that, find out what those options are. Moretoretire.com is the website. Tool around there, find out more, or give Mark a call, 984-300-1984. 984 $300,1984. So we go into retirement with a lot of different buckets of money, so to speak. IRAs, 401ks, Roths, brokerage, all these things. The thing is when you dip into those accounts, many of them are taxed differently. So let's talk about the first one and the one that most people have, and that's a IRA or a 401k. This is what we refer to as deferred tax money. That means you haven't paid the taxes yet. So, Mark, if you dip into your 401k, you say, hey, I need to buy a car. It's a $40,000 car. How does that affect me when I take that money in my retirement years?
That's a fantastic question, because at first I thought you were going to the area of, if you pull out of a 401k while you're working and stuff like that.
Okay.
And that's a little different because obviously you can borrow from your 401k, but then again, you have to build that back up. Mm-hmm. And if you don't make up on that loan, then eventually that becomes taxable income. So again, if you're taking money out of an IRA, a traditional IRA, or 401k in retirement, then obviously it's going to be taxed as ordinary income.
Okay.
If it's before 59 and a half, then you'll get hit with a 10% penalty by the IRS unless you have a really good excuse. And you have to work that out with an accountant or CPA that is confident they can help you in that area. So the question is, how is that going to affect your taxable income? Does it push you into a higher tax bracket or what?
Yeah, I think that if you have some big expenditure that you come across in your retirement years, maybe you find that RV that you've always wanted. Maybe you find that place down in Florida as you've vacationed a little bit, and then you say, I think I'd like to buy that place. Oh, I've got that money in my 401k. Here's $300,000. Well, guess what? You have now gone from a $65,000 retiree to a $360,000 retiree, according to Uncle Sam. He looks at you a little differently, doesn't he, Mark?
Oh, yeah. And that's the thing. So we discuss, have you done a Roth IRA? Have you done Roth conversions? Mm-hmm. I mean, I rolled a 401k the other day, and I asked a client if they knew what was Roth 401k versus traditional 401k, and they weren't sure. And when you look at the statement doesn't tell you. Mm-hmm. So you actually have to call and ask the provider, and they break it down for you. In this case, it was almost half-half. So these are a lot of the conversations we have. But now let's talk about Roth. Yeah. Let's talk about Roth conversions. I'll give you an example. A client of mine asked me to convert some traditional to Roth from one brokerage account to another recently, and he had done some earlier this year as well. Let's just say, for example, you have a Roth IRA where you have basically converted maybe, let's say, $100,000, okay, right? And let's say to this date it's worth $140,000. Well, we know that you have this 5-year wait period, but the 5-year wait period for the tax-free withdrawal is based on the growth. Now, in the IRC, in the Internal Revenue Code, it tells you that if you take out money out of a Roth IRA, you can take the principal back. There's no problem with that, and they'll allow you to have the principal back. So you might be limited early on, but there are some exceptions to those limitations. So these are conversations that I like to have because a lot of people don't know about this stuff.
Yeah, your Roth money, you've paid taxes on that, so you don't have to worry about that part of it when you're in retirement. Your 401k, completely different. That's tax deferred. You pay the taxes when you take the money. Now let's talk about some of the other places where people put their money. That would be perhaps they have a brokerage account. They bought stocks. They hold stocks. And so if you get into retirement and you start to sell those for income or for whatever purpose you have, that is going to be taxed a little bit different. And now we're talking about capital gains. So explain that to me.
Sure, absolutely. So in the past, this occurs with folks that like to do trades often. So this could occur. I'll give an example. Let's say you're trading based on some stocks and you decide to sell a stock and it's less than a year that you've owned it. Well, we realize that if a case like that happens, you're going to pay ordinary income tax, right? Mm-hmm. However, if it's a year later or more, then you have capital gains. So the difference is, what kind of tax bracket are you in? Ordinary income tax bracket, are you in a 12 or a 22? Now, there's a big difference, right? Mm-hmm. Well, with capital gains, it could be 0 or 15 or 20, just depending on where you're at with regards to your ordinary income as well. So understanding this and preparing for this really does matter because you want to know if you should or shouldn't sell a position.
This is kind of interesting, this area here, because you hear people like Warren Buffett, who has said over the years, he goes, I don't pay taxes like my secretary pays taxes. That's because he gets paid on these long-term capital gains, which are 0, 15, or 20, where his secretary might be paying 20, 25, 30% in taxes, and it just doesn't seem right. But that's how a lot of wealthy people get their income, is from these capital gains, isn't it?
Yeah, and Warren Buffett is also a famous one for loving to own stock and then do covered calls. And he'll do those, because he knows he can get income from it, and he loves the stock, and he doesn't care. He'll keep the stock. So that's another way. There's a lot of different things that some of the ultra-rich people do that us ordinary people don't do. But what we like to do is we like to have a conversation. We want to understand, where are you at this stage in life? Do you need to sell this particular asset or not? And let's have a real conversation. I am not a tax professional, but I know tax professionals, and I can look at tax brackets, and I can look at AGIs for people, and I can actually tell you what things might appear to be, but we obviously have to talk to the tax professional.
Well, wealth management and tax management isn't just for the wealthy, okay? We all look at that tax code the same way, and we want to be educated about it, and we want to make the right decisions about it when it comes to our retirement. You're listening to the Marc Oslar Retirement Experience, and you can find Marc online at moretoretire.com, moretoretire.com, or 984 300 1984, having this conversation. And we're talking about taxes here, and this should be a part of your retirement conversation. I've saved all this money in these places. How are they taxed? It's an important conversation. Now, the next one is one that you just mentioned, an annuity. And so you purchase an annuity from an insurance company, and then you get paid. Is that taxed in any other way than ordinary income? Is that anything else that we have to worry about there?
Well, yeah. I mean, here this is interesting. So I'll bring this up because I had a situation like this recently where a person was saying to me, taxes are starting to really tug at me here. I said, okay, well, let's understand your situation. Well, they had over $1 million in the bank, right? And because of that, and they're earning some interest or whatever. So here they are, they're not using the interest, and they're paying taxes on somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000 a year on money they're not using. I said, well, you could easily look at something like a non-qualified deferred annuity. Well, why would I do that? Because you can defer the taxes. If you really don't want to pay the taxes, then you can defer the taxes on a non-qualified annuity. So if you're not pulling the money out, it'll just defer. And then the kids can be, they can have their way with that little tax problem, right? But if you have some life insurance built in, it wouldn't matter. But annuities have a great tax advantage in that way for non-qualified money, because if you're not touching it, gross tax deferred, but it's also compound. And that's also another great way to look at it.
Options. It's what we really want to sit down as we talk about our retirement. This is my goal. How do I get there? Let's look at 1, 2, 3, A, B, and C. And if there's a D, E, F, great. The last one here on our list here is the big surprise that so many people have when they get into retirement. They look up and they get themselves a Social Security account, and they figure, okay, I'm going to get $3,000 a month if I wait until age 67. Okay, great. And then they get their check, and it's not $3,000. So your Social Security check can be taxed. And is this kind of dependent on the income that you're bringing in, and what counts as income? How does that all work?
Yes. So, we were discussing this before in the past. If you have about $32,000 or less, then there's not going to be a tax on your Social Security. If you have above that $32,000 up to $44,000, you're going to get hit with a 50% tax on your Social Security. Not 50% taken away from you, but 50% of your Social Security is taxable. Okay. Then it moves up to 85% taxable over $44,000. Now, granted, when we have this conversation, we discuss this, and it's really important to understand that municipal bonds can count towards something like this as well, and people don't know that. Right? So we like to have that conversation as well. But when I look at Social Security and how it pertains to taxes, I like to bring up a really good point here. Did you know this was kind of a bipartisan type thing here? Basically, it was George H.W. Bush that implemented 50% of it being taxable. And it was hilarious because everybody remembered him saying, No
New
taxes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. They crucified him on that one. But then it was Bill Clinton that added the extra bracket to where 85% of it could be taxable. And it was never intended to be taxed, right? So that's why now things are a little different with the one big beautiful bill, right? Gotcha. And these are the conversations we like to have. So I have it in my PowerPoint. We do presentations. We have conversations. Sit at my office. Come in. I'll challenge you to ask me as many questions as you like. I'll ask you a bunch of questions because I want to get to know you. But the taxes are really important to understand. And let me make this point again: CDs versus annuities. CD, you have to pay taxes on it if you're not using it. Right? You're not using it, you still got to pay taxes on it, and it's not compound. An annuity is deferred and compound. Now, if you do pull it out, is it ordinary income just like a CD?
Well, there's a term out there that everybody's going to have to get used to in retirement, and that is something called provisional income. And, you know, when we say if you make $32,000 or less, you'll pay zero taxes on your Social Security. But what is income in Social Security? Is the interest that I make on my savings account, is that income? Is the capital gains, is the money that I get from my investment account, is that income? Is there, if I pull from my 401k, is that income? How do we figure that stuff out? There's got to be a list someplace, Mark. What is provisional income?
Well, provisional income is what we make of it, right? So, you know, truthfully, when we're looking at trying to build an income plan for you, we want to derive it from several different areas.
Okay.
I don't want it to just come from one place, because how much can we rely on that income from one place? So one of the things I start off with is I chop 20% off the top of Social Security. Why? Because, Randy, you and I have this conversation all the time.
Yep.
Sometime between 2032 and 2033, everybody's Social Security would drop by 20% if they don't fix what? Our Social Security system. And if they don't, that's what's going to happen. So it's better to build a plan based on what we see currently and then adjust and switch as the future happens. But provisional income, yeah. Let's work on that a little bit, because if you're relying, let's say, on stock dividends, well, a stock dividend, Randy, is a stock dividend have a guarantee to it?
Not at all, no.
No, it doesn't. Anything to do with dividends, that's circumstantial, right? Mm-hmm. That's based on the circumstances of how the company's doing, performing, if they think they can or can't do it. Now, for me, I want to build a real income plan. If somebody came to me and they had no other plan other than Social Security, and I knew their expenses were much greater than the Social Security, then we're going to have to start looking at some things that have preservation tactics. We might even look at some fixed index annuities. We might look at building in an income rider if a situation was like that.
There are a lot of different options that we want to explore in our retirement, and I want to look at all of them, whether it's income, where it's tax planning, where it's Social Security planning. Let's just set it all out on the table for you, and that's really what it is to show you what's right for you, and you make those decisions and talk through them with Mark. You may have some ideas about how you want to generate income in retirement. Let's get that all out on the table. Here's the number and here's the website. We'll do a no-cost, no-obligation look at your retirement, what you've done to save, what's going in, what's coming out, do that kind of budgetary thing, and figure out what are your dreams in retirement? What do you want to do? Let's put the money with the dreams. Here's the number. Here's the website, moretoretire.com. Again, moretoretire.com. There's a place down at the bottom of the page where you can put a little information in there, and then Mark and the team will reach out to you, or just give them a call. It's 984-300-1984. 984-300-1984. Get a date on a calendar today. All right, so if you're traveling for the holidays, you should know this. If you're going to rent a car, be aware. The people at Hertz have a new trick up their sleeve. They are now using AI scanners at 6 different U.S. airports, and they're going to move it out to 100 different airports. When you bring your car back, the AI scanner goes over the top of your car, and it's looking for little dings here and there. Maybe a rock came up and hit your car, or there was a ding from somebody's door or something like that. The AI scanner sees things that you don't see and charges you hundreds of dollars. So be aware of that when you go out traveling this year. And I want to relate this over to the financial area because, Mark, there are some times when there's dings inside our 401ks, there's dings inside our retirement planning that we don't usually see. what are the things that you see when you kind of pull back the layers and look underneath to see what's working and what's not working? What glaring things do you usually see?
Sure. So we like to run a report when somebody has 401k or IRA or non-qualified money in brokerage accounts. We like to run a financial report. When we run that report, it identifies a lot of things for us. So I had one I looked at recently where we look at the standard deviation, which is, as Randy would like to refer to it, as the wobble effect, right?
The wobble, yep.
There we go.
Got to talk to a third grader, buddy. Boil this down. Talk to the third grader right here, okay?
So to make it simple, what I do is, and make it really easy to understand, S&P 500 has this wobble effect that usually goes between a 14 and a 16. Once you understand that, you can look at your standard deviation and see or understand your risk that you're taking a little bit more. When I suggest something and we look at a portfolio, it's based on identifying these certain factors and then asking you risk tolerance questions. So we also look at correlation as well. When we look at correlation, it just tells us what types of funds are moving in the same direction. Mm-hmm. And if they're moving too much in the same direction, if we don't have enough moderate there, then we could correct potentially as much as the S&P corrects during a correction, and we don't want to see that occur either. So there are many different things we look at, and then, of course, we look at something called a scatter plot. Scatter plot tells us the 4 quadrants. The 4 quadrants are if you're taking low risk and what kind of low return you might have, and the one quadrant you don't want to see is the bottom right. That's where you're taking high risk with low return. Okay.
Yeah, I think that when we talk about risk level, we're always talking about how as you get toward retirement, you should lower your risk. But what Marc is saying is when we do the analysis, then let's look at the risk that you're taking. Are you getting paid off for that risk? If you're high risk in some area, maybe 5 or 10% of your portfolio, is it paying you off? And I also love, are you overlapping? Do you have the same stuff? I think that's very common. People move from job to job to job, and now they've got 4 401ks, and they are a creature of habit. So what do? They put it in an S&P 500 fund, and they put it in a bond fund. And they got the same thing in all 4 401ks, and if the market goes down, they're going down all over the place. These are things that I think are important to know about your money and where it's placed. The one question I also want to ask you, Marc, is the fees, the fee analysis that you do. Many people don't realize that they've got this 401k and there are fees that are associated with it. Sometimes they can be rather high. And sometimes when people leave their 401k provider, they go to another job and then the fees are still there and they're eating up your returns. So talk to me a little bit about identifying what those fees are and how you can help put more of that money maybe in your clients' pockets.
Oh, absolutely. So sometimes you'll see an exit fee, a custodial fee, management fee. You'll see as well, you'll see the internal expense ratio that we have to run the report on to get an average on that. We can look up those things, but I'd rather the computer do it for me. So there's a lot of different things we look up there, and we want to save you on some of those fees because, if we manage an account, like I said, the biggest expense we want to see is what we're charging you to manage that account, because we want to actively manage it and we want to be on top of it and handle it for you. So the question is, are you getting feed to death? And we don't want to see that happen. Those are some tiny dings. Let me tell you a little bit about a big ding. What if you retired on April the 10th of 2025. Mm-hmm. Well, we know that the tariff talk was nuts from April 3rd to April 10th. Mm-hmm. What if you retired on April 10th and all your accounts had dropped and you were relying on a certain percentage of income? That right there concerns me too. So now we've got these tiny dings that have turned into a dent. Mm. And that's why we need to look at this stuff ahead of time so we can prepare and plan.
You're listening to the Marc Oslar Retirement Experience. The reason we have this show is to kind of bring up some of these issues, maybe your concerns as well when it comes to your retirement planning. It's a little scary out there, markets and taxes and all that go along with it, and all this headlines about Social Security being cut back. It is really kind of scary. So let's give you some data. Let's get you some information. Let's see how your retirement is shaping up. You've been saving all these years. What does it mean to you per month? What are you going to be living on? Let's do that analysis. And Marc will do it for you at no charge. Here's a number and here's our website. It's moreToRetire.com. moretoretire.com or 984-300-1984. 984-300-1984. Let's get a date on a calendar and talk through your retirement today. All right, so we talk about having a plan for retirement. There's your plan for retirement. You probably don't want your uncles or your aunts or your parents or your brothers or your sister's plan. You want your plan for retirement. Do you want Uncle Sam's plan for your retirement? You'd be shocked to find out how many people are just following Uncle Sam's plan blindly into retirement. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Marc Oslar Retirement Experience.
A simple piece of paper. It's something we use every day. For the most part, it does what it's designed to do. It sits there flat on your desk as a placeholder for information. But with a couple strategic folds, suddenly your flat piece of paper becomes an airplane and flies across the room. Your 401k is kind of like that flat piece of paper. It just sits there as a placeholder for your money. Marc Oslar can show you those strategic moves to take your 401k from just sitting there to creating the income you need for retirement. Call today for a free no-obligation meeting. 984-300-1984. That's 984-300-1984. Or online at moretoretire.com.
Welcome back to the Marc Oslar Retirement Experience. Online, it's moretoretire.com. Go to the website today. Check it out, moretoretire.com. And there you'll see all about Marc and the team, and you'll also have a place where you can go to say, hey, I'm interested to talk about my retirement. Hey, I'm worried about the markets. Hey, I'm worried about Social Security. Just put it right in there. Marc and the team will reach out, and we'll get going on it. 984-300-1984 is the number. All right, if you're retired right now and you reach the age of 73, that's when Uncle Sam says, you know that 401k you got? It's time to start dipping in there. You know why? Because I want my tax money. That's how Uncle Sam's plan works. And right now, in the month of December, there's a lot of people that are looking at that. It's called a required minimum distribution. So, Marc, when people take that money, there's so many questions here. Is December the best time to do it? Or should you do it at a different time of year? Should you take exactly what Uncle Sam says, or should you take a little bit more? How do you arrive at that particular number? The thing about this is that 80% of people just follow Uncle Sam's plan. He tells me to take the money, I take the money. That can't be the best thing for our retirement. I just don't see that. So talk to me about what we should be doing here.
You know, this is a great topic. So there's so many different ways to do stuff like this. Let's just say, for example, you were born 1959 or before. Okay. Then you have to start taking RMDs at 73. Mm-hmm. If you were born 1960 or after, so if you turn 65 this year, then you don't have to take an RMD until age 75. It's the required amount that the government says you have to take out. It generally starts in a neighborhood close to 4% and slowly goes up each year because it's a factoring table. So as the factoring table lowers, the divisor goes up, so the amount goes up a little bit each year. Okay. Now, with all that to be said, you know, I looked at a different strategy most recently, and I'd be curious to see what you think of this. You know, what if a person says, well, I don't need this RMD? I said, okay, you want to give it away? Well, of course. You know, so they do the charitable distribution, right? You can do your requirement of distribution. You can have it sent as a qualified charitable distribution, right? Mm-hmm. So if you do that, then it goes straight to the charity, and you're not going to pay taxes on it, right? Because you've gifted it. Now, if you didn't mind paying the taxes on it, why don't you turn around and look at, what if I took out the same amount of money, but this time I converted it to a Roth IRA? Oh, well, you know what's going to happen is now you're doubling up on this distribution. You could potentially be helping yourself out tax-wise in the future, because now you're putting something else over to the side that's not going to get hit with a required minimum distribution. So the question is, how many different ways can you do this? So I also tell people, well, you know, you could always buy life insurance with your with your required minimum distribution, right? If you did that, you know, that could offset some taxable event on the IRA money when you pass it on. Because if you're just going by what Uncle Sam says, The RMD, the RMD, the RMD. Basically, you're going to leave a bunch of this taxable money to your family in the future, and they have just a few ways to look at it. They could pay the taxes on the whole thing. They could potentially just, if it's an annuity, maybe have it paid out over a 5-year payout at your death, or they could do something like an inherited IRA, where they have to exhaust it within 10 years of your death, but they can grow it and withdraw from it during that period of time, and they have to take at least an RMD, but I would suggest taking a whole lot more than that. So all of this is wrapped up in a big bubble. It's a tax bubble, right? And the question is, how do we want to go about this?
So at this time of year, December, a lot of people feel, charitable. You talked about charitable giving. What about giving to your family? You say to yourself, okay, here's a bunch of money that I don't need. And so maybe I'll pass it on to the kids or the grandkids, and I get to see them enjoy that money. Gifting, there are limits on that, but gifting helps them. It doesn't necessarily help you from a tax perspective. Am I correct there?
Yeah. So, it's interesting because, yes, if you give, then obviously it comes out of your future estate too and stuff like that. But it's something that you're able to do. It does not help you on taxes. But again, if you're gifting it, it's a gift. They don't have to pay taxes on that money, right? So gifting is a great way to get money out of an estate if you want to kind of spend down an estate. That's another way to look at it. And the gifting provisions seem like the IRS seems to be going up at least $1,000 a year, at least in the past that I've watched it, where when people gift money, it seems like each and every year it's going up. But what's interesting about gifting is you can gift a year back and you can gift into the future as well. So you could potentially multiply that gift and just count it towards multiple years as well.
When you are in your working years and you've got something big coming up, you're saving for a house, you're saving for a vacation, you're saving for a child's college, something like that. So you start putting extra money away because you have that big expense coming up. When you're 73, 75 years old and you're doing these RMDs, what big expense do you have coming up in your future? And that's that big enchilada out there that we all talk about, and that's long-term care, going into a nursing home, needing some kind of assistance in your 80s and into your 90s. Mark, that money that is coming out of that 401k, that IRA, and you don't know what to do with it, what sort of preparations can we make to say, okay, here's an expense that I think I might have to deal with. How can I make that money work for that?
Sure. So a lot of times we bring up long-term care alternatives because I am licensed to sell long-term care, but it's quite expensive, and folks don't always like to buy it as much as they used to in the past because the insurance company's gone so much up on their prices because it was a losing proposition from the early long-term care policies. So a lot of companies have come up with some alternatives. You have actual long-term care annuities, which you have to have a long-term care license for to do something like that, and you have to answer some health questions. Then there are living needs benefits, and they can't call it long-term care. They call it living needs, but they have provisions where maybe if you can't do 2 out of 6 activities of daily living, there are certain payouts for those features. There's also life insurance that does this as well, but it's actually pretty smart to use qualified money for something like this. Qualified money being an IRA or 401k, but I'm talking about not Roth IRA money. I'm talking about qualified money like traditional. Okay, so traditional IRA money, because if it ends up being used for those healthcare costs have a write-off to them. And so if you have a good accountant or CPA, maybe you're getting that taxable amount out of your estate, in the future. So it's actually a really good and smart way to look at it when you plan with that type of money.
There are a lot of options out there. If you're retired right now, you're coming up on your RMD, and first you want to know, what do I have to pay the government this year? Then your next option is A, B, C, D, E. What am I going to do with this money? Maybe you need that money to live, okay, but maybe there's other options that you can look at as well. These are the kind of things that you can explore with Mark and the team. Give Mark a call, go to the website. It's time to get a date on a calendar, and let's talk through it. More2retire.com. More2retire.com. Just spell it right out. Down at the bottom of the page is a place for you to put some information in there. Mark and the team reach out to you, or you can reach out to us right now. It is 984-300-1984. 984-300-1984. Well, one of the things that I've learned in life is that sometimes I can look at somebody and say, I don't ever want to do that. I don't want to make that mistake, okay? So sometimes, I looked at my parents in their retirement, and I said, okay, I'm going to go a little different direction here from what they did. This is the story of Agnes. Agnes was a really good saver in her life, and now she's 79 years old, and she's got more money at age 75 or 79 than she knows what to do with. And she says to herself, I was so focused on saving that I forgot to actually live. She would say to her friends, no spendy dinners, not going to Broadway shows, not going on trips. I got to save my money for retirement. Got to save. And she said, they stopped asking. I lost touch with the people who I really should have enjoyed in my life because I was so focused on saving money. And here she is, the time to use that money and nothing to do with it. So I think that the whole idea of being a good saver is great. You get into retirement, and then your reward is what? I mean, Mark, the social interactions that you have, those are as important as the dollars that are in your account. And she talks about this. She says, treat yourself, keep your friends, don't wait on your dreams. Talk to people, talk to your professional, make sure you've got the money, but make sure you have the social lifeline that you need in your retirement years. This is a big part of the conversation, isn't it?
Absolutely. I just had this conversation with my wife recently, and we were talking about this and talking about how, items and things you buy, how they just, they lose their luster, right? You don't desire them like you used to, and they just sit around and collect dust. I mean, it's great to win a trophy, but again, just collecting dust, right? And I think about that, but then when I go back to my fondest memories, they happen to be the trips that I took, the experiences we had, the restaurants that we went to, and the trips, all of those things. Those are the things in life that I remember better than things and stuff. And it's just like I said before, if you're going to do this and you want to do this traveling or do something fun or go out to dinner or do those types of things in retirement, you're going to want to do them in your 50s and 60s and maybe even 70s. But when you get into your 80s, you're not going to want to do it. So when we build this into the plan with you, you and I are going to build this together. I'm going to talk about your wants and your needs. And we're not going to say that your wants are not as important as your needs.
This is one thing here that I want to kind of close the show with today because I hear it all the time, is you get yourself ready for retirement and your kids are, now in their 20s and you've paid for some weddings, you've got them through school, you got a nice 401k balance, and you get into retirement and now you start looking at your expenses and you go, okay, I've still got $40,000 on the house. I've still got $20,000 on this car. I've got this. So let's pay off all the debts before I get into retirement. Then all the money that I've got is going to go toward my retirement. Seems like a really good idea. But Mark, where are you taking that money from? Where is it coming from? Sometimes people see that big 401k balance and they go, I'm going to pay off the house. I'm going to get rid of my mortgage. Sometimes that's a lot better psychological decision than it is a financial decision. How much debt should we really get rid of right before we go into retirement?
I had a situation that popped up a couple of years ago. A client was referred to me from clients of mine that I just truly love. And so I said, well, of course, I'll take good care of them. I'll talk to them about everything. And I'm just trying to understand what they wanted to accomplish with their situation was basically they had a business they wanted to sell. They also had this loan over here that was the combination of their home property and some commercial property that was attached to the loan. And it happened to be part of the property that was on the exterior of the business, but they were able to keep that, okay? So it wasn't sold with the business. Well, the question is, do they pay that off? And their CPA was so conservative, he said, yeah, pay it off. And I was looking at it saying, well, you're not going to have anything to work with for you, for retirement and in retirement. And what I can tell you is this. A couple years later, they ended up selling that property. And guess what? No, they never got rid of that loan. They just used it as leverage. So the question is, do you have leverage in a situation or not? And is it good leverage or bad leverage? And I certainly would not pull money out of a 401k to pay off a house unless you're talking about something very minor for amount of money, because otherwise it counts as ordinary income and can increase your tax bracket, and it could really drive you crazy.
Yeah, I was just looking at, my situation and saying, should I pay off my house? It's $1,200 a month. And then Social Security may cut back about $1,000. That'll make up for that. You start to weigh stuff out back and forth and you talk it through. But that's really what it is to sit down with you, Mark, and have that appointment and say, do I lease the car? Do I buy the car? Do I buy the place in Florida? Do I just do an Airbnb? Do I pay off my house? Do I pay off a portion of my house? All of those things have consequences, financial consequences. And I think it's important, and that's kind of what you say in your 5 steps, the ongoing support that you have with people, that it's not just, Mark, help me make my retirement plan, see you later. That's not what this is it?
No, we have 5 steps, okay? When you get to step 3, you've become a client, all right? But steps 4 and 5 are huge. So with step 4 and 5, you've got adjustments and changes, and step 5, if that's step 4, and step 5 is ongoing support. You're going to get both of those things from us. We're always going to suggest some switches and some changes, because in life you have to be willing to adjust, switch, and change. If you're not, we're probably not a great fit for each other. I want you to know I care about you, and that's why I want to share this information with you. We can have some set it and forget it types of situations, but it's not often. So this is what you're going to get from us. You're going to get that kind of support. And where do we want to start? We want to start with preservation, income, and growth. What are we preserving for you to last in retirement? What kind of income do you need in retirement? Because that's number one. And how do the taxes and inflation impact that income? And then growth. What's a good, sensible growth in retirement? And how do we go on from that point? Those are the most important provisions. Outside of that, we build everything else around you and customize it for you. But you're always going to get ongoing support from us.
Think about all the questions that you have financially in your life, and you wonder, who should I call about that? And you talk to your friends, you talk to your parents, you talk to people. And what if you had that person who was there, who knew all about your financial life and was helping you plan the next 10, 20, 30 years of your life? And that is the perspective that they look at. And when you have those questions, you've got that person right there. That's an important thing, and I think that is another valuable part of putting a financial advisor in your life. Give Mark a call, kick the tires, see if you're right for each other. MoreToRetire.com is the website, MoreToRetire.com. Tool around there, learn more. We talk about it all the time here on the show, the steps to more. Let's give you more in your retirement years. That's the whole idea here. Or call Mark and let's get a date on the calendar. It's 984-300-1984. 984-300-1984. We hope you have a great weekend. We will be here next week, and we hope you will be too, on the Marc Oslar Retirement Experience.
Insurance products are offered through the insurance business Marc Oslar Retirement Experience. Marc Oslar Retirement Experience is also an investment advisory practice that offers products and services through Impact Partnership Wealth LLC, a registered investment advisor. IPW does not offer insurance products. The insurance products offered by Marc Oslar Retirement Experience are not subject to investment advisor requirements. Investing involves risks, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims paying ability of the issuing carrier. This radio podcast is intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be considered as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual situation. Marc Oslar Retirement Experience is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during the show shall constitute legal or tax advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. The information and opinions contained herein are provided by third parties that have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by Marc Oslar Retirement Experience. Market Guard is a firm that provides investment signals as well as portfolio allocation recommendations for a wide variety of model portfolios. Market Guard does not offer advice or enter into fiduciary relationships. Please remember that converting an employer plan account to a Roth IRA is a taxable event. Increased taxable income from the Roth IRA conversion may have several consequences. Be sure to consult with a qualified tax advisor before making any decisions regarding your IRA.